When you're sighting in your sight with a multiple pin movable sight, there's a lot of questions of how do I set that up. What our recommendation is you dial the sight all the way to the top. There is a stop there. As soon as that stops, you're there. You can lock that sight in. You don't have to, but you can. So once you get that locked in, just sight in your pins like you normally would, 20, 30, 40. I'm going to talk about with the 3-pin setup instead of the 5. So when you dial this sight down for those indicator needles and longer shots, is what you'll find is you can dial back up, and we call this a zero stop and zero out. So you're back to 20, 30, 40, and it's going to be that way every time. So after you have that sighted in, the next step you're really going to want to do is work on your sight tape. There's about 20 different ways to do a sight tape, but what my favorite thing to do is I'll sight in 20, 30, 40, I'll grab my bow, and then what I'll do is I'll take those pins and I will take it to the sight tape that I think it is, and I will match up those pins looking straight down onto the sight tape and find the one that matches my 20-yard pin, and I get right over the top of it, and I'm trying to match up my 20 and my 40 as close as I possibly can, looking straight down. And the closer you can get and the more accurate you're sighted in, the better your sight tape's going to be. So with this pin gap, it looks like my sight tape is about 252. It says 252 FPS. The numbers on our sight tapes, just for everybody's information, these will get you close if you chronograph your bow, but they're really a reference so you know to go faster or slower. And when you're setting up your sight tapes and you step back and you dial out to those other distances, just remember, if you're shooting low, you need a slower sight tape. If you're shooting high, you need a faster sight tape. And that's how you'll go back and forth with those. And this will also be with our dual indicator needle. A couple other ways you can do this. You can measure this pin gap and measure that up on your sight tapes as well. You can also, if you're shooting a single pin sight, put a blank piece of tape on here. You can use masking tape or whatever. Mark your 20-yard spot, and then as you go down, mark each individual yardage that you go out to. You can dial out to 40, 50, 60. The farther out you get, obviously the more accurate the sight tape is going to be, or the closer you're going to get right off the first bat. And just also another thing to remember when you're doing your sight tapes, when you put it on, it might not be perfect. Make sure you step back to the farthest distance you are comfortable shooting and practice at that distance with that, and that's where you'll really determine how accurate your sight tape is. Getting ready to cut out these sight tapes, you'll notice there's numbers on both sides. One of the things you want to make sure of is you get the numbers on the correct side of the sight. So we're just going to cut out this 252 feet a second sight tape. And the really awesome thing about this dual indicator system is with the single indicator needle, which I personally have been using for several years, you cut it off at wherever your bottom pin is. With this dual indicator system, you actually get the opportunity to put a 20-yard pin in, etc. So as we check this is what we know we want to cut off the numbers on the inside, so I'll just do that really quick here. And try to cut it as close, as straight as you possibly can. But the neat thing is now is what we're going to do, we know we've got this dialed in. We're going to peel that sight tape off. And then as you see, the reason why I cut those numbers out to the one side, and this is the other neat thing about these indicator needles, is they are adjustable. So if you don't get your sight tape right in the perfect spot where you want it, you can go back and adjust the needle down or up. So as I move that, I put my tape on, and you see I've got my tape on, it's square on there. I can dial my sight up and down and it's not catching on the tape. And yes, it does look like my 20-yard spot is up a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to get your inch set, and most inch sets have the 0.05, and you can come in and adjust your indicator. Loosen, slide it up. And this is one of the neat features about this dual indicator needle system, and the reason why we send you extra needles is you can swap these needles around. And I'll just show you guys this really quick. And the other thing I could have done, and I still can do, is I can move this sight tape down a little bit. Obviously, we're not going to be able to get 100 yards out of this particular tape because of the speed of the bow, just assuming, and I was just matching it off of the tapes there. But as you see these indicator needles, see how they're bent and they're offset and separate? You can set them up this way to get them as close as possible, or say you're building a 5-pin sight and you want to go the opposite direction. You can offset them so they're farther apart on the movable section in here.